Hello, everyone. This is Alejandra, Virtual Latinos Digital Marketing Manager. Thank you for joining us today. This is a brand new webinar, and we are really happy to talk to you today about why choose a Latino VA over other virtual assistants. So let me introduce you to Jaime Nacach. He is Virtual Latinos founder and CEO. He will be hosting this webinar and answering all your questions after this presentation. So let's welcome Jaime and start this webinar.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you guys spending some time with us. This is going to be hopefully a very informational and value, webinar in terms of answering a lot of questions that a lot of people have. As many of you probably know, most of the market or industry when it comes to virtual assistants is in the Philippines, even though, of course, there's virtual assistants around the world, including here in the US. So today, that's going to be the focus of our topic. The differences between hiring people outside the Philippines versus, somebody in the US or Latin America. So we're going to talk about that. All right, let's get started. And of course, just so you know, this, like most webinars, is going to be recorded, and you will be given a link to see this later on. Sounds good? So let me get started with that. All right, so first, a bit about me for those who don't yet know who I am. So I'm Jaime. I'm originally from Mexico City, and I created first a company called Luminari, which is a digital marketing agency. And that company is still the legal company that Virtual Latinos is a part of. And actually, the whole reason I started Virtual Latinos is because I wanted to hire people from Latin America. So that was something that I found difficult while I was working at our agency, and I basically did a lot of research trying to figure out how much work it would be to hire, talented professionals from Latin America. So I kind of found that it wasn't really easy to do it, which is part of what I'm going to be talking about today. But most importantly, Virtual Latinos is all about a community, both for clients and assistants, and it's all about helping, businesses grow so that founders, CEOs, small teams or agencies, anybody looking for help can get great help at a really great affordable price, but most importantly at great quality, right? Because if the price is great but the quality is not great, then it doesn't work. So there's got to be a lot of good, important things together for it all to work out together. So here, let me chat to you a bit about, what it is that we're going to be talking about today. So we're first going to, discuss a little bit about, what do you have that you can give someone to help you with. There's a lot of things that a lot of different people do. So we're going to talk a bit about, how do you get started with hiring somebody. We're going to talk about specifically, why a Latino virtual assistant, which is going to be then connected to, of course, what are the differences between people that are in Latin America compared to the people in the Philippines, as well as compared to virtual assistants within the US, which is definitely another option that some of our clients are currently hiring, whether that's actual virtual assistants that are not, necessarily part of your company yet, or they're simply now remote workers, because with all these COVID happening, a lot of companies are just working with their people remotely, right? So we're going to be talking about that. And then, we're going to give a few more examples of, what you can actually give our Latinos in terms of work. What type of tasks can they help you with? So we're going to cover that as well. And then we're going to tell you a bit about how Virtual Latinos works for those who are interested. Now, as you know, Alejandra is right here. She's joined our team almost a year ago. She's great. And so she's actually going to be talking as part of this webinar as well and sharing a little bit about, how she has been working with us, as well as another component of what we're going to talk about today. So definitely, if you have any questions, please type your questions at any time. If I can answer them throughout the webinar, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll definitely answer them at the end. Sounds good? So this is going to take about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions. So let's kind of get started. All right. So taking tasks off your plate, right? So this is the first main question that a lot of people have, including myself. When I started, I'm like, okay, so what should I give somebody to do, and what should I keep to myself? So there's definitely that important aspect before you hire anyone. So you got to kind of think of a list and making sure what are all the things that you're currently doing, and then that is literally the easiest way to do it. Create a list, and then you can literally create a column on that list. Let's say if it's an Excel list, where you say, okay, this is something that I can absolutely do only myself, but this is maybe something else that somebody else can do. And that's kind of the first step, right? And then you can also, of course, you got to think about and consider like how many people do you need? Do you need one person or multiple people, depending on the types of skills you're looking for? That obviously is connected to the budget. Do you have a budget to be able to cover somebody full time or part time? And those are things that you might actually not have the answers to at the beginning, and that's actually totally okay. Usually, as you start thinking about this, you come up with more questions, and hopefully, we'll be able to provide more answers, right? Um, Another important thing is, how do you want to hire? There's multiple ways to hire assistants these days. There's a lot of different platforms, including, our companies, which has a platform called the Directory, as well as hiring through agencies, right? So you gotta decide, what's the best avenue for you. And we're going to talk about some of those options as we speak today. So now, let me kind of give you a little background in terms of my personal experience, in terms of how things were before and how things are now. So in the marketing agency called Luminati, my entire team was all in San Diego in the US. And the reason I started hiring outside the United States is because I decided that instead of raising our prices, in order to stay competitive, I wanted to just lower my costs and still keep our pricing the way it was. We were working with really small businesses at the time, like really tiny. So we didn't really want to raise prices because we really liked helping people who were small businesses. So I kind of learned about working with people in the Philippines because that was kind of the only main thing that I found myself as I did my research online. So going into the personal experience in terms of the before. So I did go through hiring people in the Philippines. I worked, I believe, with 3 different assistants. And the long story short is that it was unfortunately not a great experience for me. I chose to hire on my own, which meant I did not go through an agency. I chose to use onlinejobs.ph, which is a great site with a lot of people, like hundreds and hundreds of people that you can actually find through there. But it was a very time-consuming process. I would post a job and I would get lots of people applying, and I had to spend a lot of time going through people's CVs, figuring out who was good, who was not good, and then making time to actually interview them, book the interviews. It was simply a really long and time-consuming process. So I ended up, in my personal opinion, at the very end of my whole process, which took, I think the first time it just took 2 months just to hire the first person. Eventually, I hired someone, they started working, but the first person scammed me. That's for another time, but they ended up not showing up, kept my money, didn't do anything. The second person ended up being great. She stuck around for about 3 months. But then throughout our relationship, there was problems with the internet, and the internet sometimes just wouldn't work, and sometimes the assistant had to take time off, and sometimes I would send messages and they didn't reply fast enough, and the whole time difference was an issue. So I just didn't love the experience as a whole. I'm like, I'm in San Diego, California. Mexico's right around the corner. Why can't I just find people in my time zone, which would be much better? Ideally, they'd speak Spanish. They'd also cross the border if I needed to. And that's kind of what I switched to. So I did hire somebody from Tijuana, Mexico, who was mostly working in Tijuana, but she had a visa, so she could cross, and we could meet from time to time. So that worked out until that person decided, to take up another job, which is when I said, okay, this whole thing about hiring in the Philippines was not great. Hiring from Mexico sounds like a good idea. Why don't we make this bigger, right? And that's kind of where Virtual Latinos came to be. There's a whole story of how we started the whole thing, but the point is, I wanted to find people who were local, or at least local in terms of the time zone, who were qualified. And in this case, I was really looking for the top talent. Of course, in this case, I still had to do all the work. I didn't go through any agency because one did not exist. So that's kind of why we built it. All right. Um, so, all right. So why a Latino virtual assistant? So the whole idea in general is that we want you to stop burning yourself in terms of trying to do everything on your own. I'll tell you, going back to the personal experience, I'm one of those guys who loves to do everything with the highest degree of detail, which definitely was a problem for growing the marketing agency because I wanted to do everything perfect. And then, of course, I realized there's no way to do everything perfect if you want to grow a company, which is, of course, why we hired people in the US and they helped. But it's usually a thing that you need to let go in terms of always finding perfection if you're that type of person, and just letting people do their best and just kind of improve it as you go through, right? So the point is that yes, if you've never hired an assistant, whether it's from the Philippines or Latin America or wherever you choose to do so, it's actually something that you should start and then improve as you go. Because if you're expecting perfection from the very beginning, you might be up for failure, right? Nobody's perfect. Everybody gets to learn as they grow with any person that they work with. So let's talk about some of those benefits. Now, Alejandra, I see myself and you on the bottom left. I don't know if people do too on their view, but that's blocking the
Yeah.
actual slides for me. Is it blocking it
Yeah.
for you too?
Yes, it's showing that way, but you can close
Okay.
or yeah, you
I'm
need.
I'm gonna just turn off the video. Maybe you turn off the video too, and maybe
No,
that'll
but
go
it's not
away.
the video. I think you need
Oh
to click on the arrows that shows on
no,
the other way around, I think.
no, I think we were already there.
There
Oh,
you
there you
go.
go.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. So, all right. So we already kind of mentioned it, but the main benefit of working with people in Latin America compared to people in the Philippines is definitely the time zone. Most people that are in Latin America are within, at the very most, 2 or 3 time zones away from the East Coast in the United States, and at the most 5 time zones from California, or maybe 6 depending on daylight savings. But it's really not that much. And most of the people in Latin America, in terms of the people working, tend to be concentrated in usually the same time zones. There's only a few extremes, such as parts of Argentina and parts of Mexico, which are of course right next to California. But generally speaking, most Latinos are going to be able to work on the same time zone as you, whatever time zone it is that you're in within the United States. Uh, in the case of obviously Latinos, they're all bilingual, or at least I'm going to say 99% of them. Believe it or not, we have actually somebody from India who lives in Mexico who works with us, as well as a Filipino who lives in Costa Rica and works with us as well. But other than those two, most people speak both obviously Spanish and English, so they're fully bilingual. And that's of course great for only the people who care about people speaking Spanish. And just so you know, most people don't care that people speak Spanish. Only about 15% of clients do. But in case you were to be interested, that's an extra, nice to have. Now, as you can probably imagine, Latin America is kind of a bit underrated by a lot of people that don't know that there's actually great talent and a lot of great professionals who are from down there. And that's a huge plus that if you didn't know about, you definitely should take advantage. In case you didn't know, I'll also share with you as a native, Mexican, that it's, always growing up, we knew that, unfortunately we live in a third world country where, you get to go and have a profession, graduate from the university, but in most cases, for a lot of people, there's just not enough opportunities to, actually do what you study or what you like to do. So people end up doing other jobs, and that's unfortunately still very common. So we're able to now actually have those people that are in Latin America work for American companies, and in many cases we're able to help them get a better job. Sometimes not just on the pay rates, but also on an ideal job that they could probably never have access to in their countries because they just don't exist. Um, in our case, specifically because obviously there's a lot of Latinos in Latin America, but the people that we pick to work as assistants, in most cases, about 95% of the time or more, they're university graduates because it's something that we don't require, but we highly, think that people should have. And of course, in terms of the quality, there's a lot of really great, talented Latinos who would do very professional work. So that's obviously a benefit as well. Now, let's dive into some of these issues about the differences between assistants from the Philippines versus assistants from Latin America. One of the obvious ones we already talked about is the time zones. Compared to the Philippines, there's like 7 hours difference, at least from California. It'll be more if you're in the East Coast. So that's usually a pretty bad thing for most people, but it's actually a great thing for a lot of other people who prefer to actually finish their day working in the US and then have the assistants work overnight during our night, which is their day. But for me, at least, and for many other people, they rather have people who are working at the same time as them. So, of course, people in the Philippines can work at night, which would be during our day. But, naturally, humanly, it's not the most comfortable for most people to work, the graveyard shift, which is what's commonly known as. So that's definitely an obvious one. The other part is actually a pretty important part, the cultural differences. So yes, uh, American culture is definitely around the world today, as you know, because the U.S. is of course a big power in many different ways. But of course, the people who are from Latin America, including Mexico all the way to Argentina, simply because we're closer to the United States, it's easier to travel to. It's easier to just connect with American culture as well as things that are imported, from the U.S. into all these countries. So Latinos tend to have a much closer connection to the U.S., which actually does help a lot. I didn't actually think too much about that until our clients who started hiring kind of gave me feedback. It's like, oh, it's great. These people have heard of this and that, and some of them have been to some of these countries. I mean, sorry, to many of our clients' states. In fact, some of our assistants uh, lived in the U.S. either temporarily or for a long, period of time. Some of them were born in the U.S. and then they're now just living in Latin America. But also, a lot of them have at least traveled as tourists. And that's a big plus. Having people who have actually been to the U.S. and know how some of these things work is a big important part. Um, so that covers that. And of course, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer. A very important one, which surprisingly we didn't really pay too much attention to because we actually didn't see many problems with, but it's things that people ask me is like, the internet issues. So I knew that I had internet issues with the people in the Philippines. As you know, the Philippines is just a lot of different islands, and some of those islands are pretty remote where the internet is not very reliable, and sometimes it's just people don't have internet. And obviously, if you're working with somebody virtually, it's impossible to work if the internet keeps going down. Now, of course, in major cities in the Philippines, that's not a problem, but in other islands, it is. I can tell you that in Latin America, uh, there's definitely some problems in remote areas as well, but in most cities, the internet is not a problem. The only country we've actually kind of had issues with in Latin America has been in Venezuela. As you can probably imagine, Venezuela has a lot of problems, but most of the people that we have from Venezuela, or actually all of them that are actually working and hired, they don't have a problem because they have stable internet, and that's one of the reasons clients as well as us chose to recommend them. We have, I believe, 13 people from Venezuela right now. So no connection issues right now. And as part of our process, we don't actually check the actual speed in terms of what their speed is, but we hire everyone after an interview through Zoom. So if the video connection is not good enough, we're going to just assume the rest is not going to be good enough. But if the video connection is good enough, which in most cases it is, then it's good enough for us and good enough for most of our clients. So that's definitely a plus. Now, when it comes to the language barriers, one of the things that might be obvious is that, of course, people in Latin America don't have an accent from India or from the Philippines, but of course, they still have some sort of accent, in this case from Latin America. Now, one of the benefits that also our clients kind of pointed out, even though I didn't think about it initially, is the fact that, in the US, there's obviously a lot of people that are also from Latin America or, are from Latin American families, even if they were born in the US. And the truth is that even if somebody calls you from the US and somebody has an accent that's like a Latino sort of accent, you won't necessarily judge them that they're not in the US, right? So a lot of our clients, I guess, kind of already knew that. So when they're hiring our assistants, even though our assistants are not in the US, even if they have a slight accent, those assistants who are calling their clients, the clients can't really know whether these people are in the US or not, right? And that also tends to be generally a big plus. Some people unfortunately discriminate when people are calling with a big accent, even though I think it's very normal today and people shouldn't discriminate because of an accent. And I'll tell you that so far, only once did we unfortunately had the client of one of our clients tell one of our assistants that he did not want to speak with her because she was from, I think, Costa Rica, right? And she's like, no, I want to speak with somebody in the US. And, we get it. That could happen. It's very uncommon, at least for us, because of that issue that we just mentioned. But it'll definitely be more common if you'd hire somebody from the Philippines who's generally speaking going to have an accent, even though some Filipinos also have a great native English accent, but most of them don't. Okay. Now, the work quality over cheaper workforce. And this is kind of an important thing. This is probably only relevant, specifically, we're talking about virtual Latinos and assistants that are hired through our company because we actually check everybody's quality. But I can tell you that in the Philippines, the virtual assistant world is much bigger. Like I'd say probably 20 times bigger than the industry in Latin America, because in Latin America it's pretty new. We definitely didn't start it, but we're definitely growing it. And so in the Philippines, actually knowing English is much more common than in Latin America. People speaking English or having great English skills. It's just less common in Latin America compared to the Philippines, which means it's much more probable that somebody in the Philippines can just decide to work as a virtual assistant without necessarily having a college degree or all these professional work experience. This is definitely something that varies depending on who you hire, of course. But on the general scheme, we're only, at least ourselves, only hiring people who are professional, quality, top, Latinos in terms of who we want to hire for our clients. So that's what we mean. What we mean in terms of work quality over cheaper workforce. We do have people who come and talk to us, and they're like, "Hey, I rather have a Latino rather than a Filipino," but of course they're expecting to pay like $3 an hour, which is very common in the Philippines. I'll tell you that at least we don't do that. That's too low. We pay our assistants a minimum that is going to be a very good wage for them, because we're interested in our assistants sticking around for the long term, which is one of the main issues I had when hiring people in the Philippines, which is why my assistant left me. She found another job for a slightly better rate than what I was paying, so she left. And so our assistants tend not to do that, because what we're paying them tends to be on the average, depending on the country, between 200 to 300% of what they would get paid locally. So, between 2 to 3, sometimes up to 4 times what they get paid locally. So, at least from the money perspective, they don't really have a reason to leave you or us, right, together. Which is connected to my next point about people not ghosting you. So, again, this is not necessarily true of all Latinos, but at least through what we're finding through our process, we actually don't have, well, yeah, we don't have any Latinos that are working with us who are ghosting our clients out of nowhere. It did definitely happen to us that one assistant was about to start, and the day of the onboarding session decided to, send an email, "Hey, I found something else, I'm out," and then never replied to our emails, right? But luckily for us, that only happened once. That guy was out of our community, could never work with us. But generally speaking, we actually form the relationship between the company and the assistants before they ever get to be presented to the client. So we have constant communication with everyone. If they were to stop answering us, we'd know that they would obviously stop answering our clients, which would mean we would never recommend them to our clients. So generally speaking, people don't ghost us, and probably part of the success for that is because we have a very complicated and time-consuming hiring process on purpose. We kind of weed out the people that are not going to be professional about it. So that kind of covers those main differences that I wanted to speak about. Any questions on the chat? If anybody has any questions. Not yet. All right, no problem. So this is another important thing for you to visually look at in terms of comparing the cost of virtual assistants from different parts of the world. Obviously, like I said, they could be from any country. For the purposes of this webinar, we chose these countries. So probably at the very low end, India is your cheapest bet if you're looking for the best price. That could definitely vary a lot in pricing. India is a really big place. But here we put, of the range between $3 to $4 an hour. In the Philippines, and by the way, this is it could be the average or the lowest. It depends on, how you want to look at it. In the Philippines, it used to be definitely common before that you could hire somebody for $3 an hour. It's getting less and less common as more and more people want to hire people from the Philippines. So here we're saying, $4 to $5 if you're hiring them. In this case, if you're hiring them directly, which means you're not going through an agency, okay? Just so you guys know. This is the kind of pricing if you were to hire them directly. Now, for Latin America, the price is definitely higher than the Philippines, so it'll be probably between $5 to $7 an hour if you were to hire them directly, and it could definitely go much higher depending on the skills. This is for starting costs. Now, the next kind of area where there's also virtual assistants is usually Eastern Europe. So the price there could be usually between 7 to 10 euros, which is about 9 to 12 bucks an hour. So that'd be the next more expensive part. Then, of course, in the US, a lot of people, when they speak to me, they're like, well, so why should I hire an assistant from Latin America? Because we charge as a minimum 8 bucks an hour for a full time entry level assistant. And depending on where you are from in the US, the minimum wage, for example, in Texas is like 7.50. In other states, it's also like 7.25 or 7 bucks an hour. And so they're like, well, for another dollar, I'll just hire somebody locally. And yes, that's true. You could probably hire somebody to flip burgers or have a really entry level job. But in this specific case, right, we're talking about somebody that has a college degree, that has at least 2, 3 years of work experience. So it's definitely different. Here's a question from Rob. You mentioned you have a very complex system to admit VAs. I wonder how you can make sure the VA I need for my law firm will be suitable. Okay, great, Rob. I'll definitely answer that question at least right now shortly, and then I'm happy to go into details. But obviously, there's nothing that's completely bulletproof in terms of making sure that the assistant is going to be perfect. But I can tell you that lawyers right now, specifically immigration lawyers, are our second most popular types of clients. We have a lot of different clients that are lawyers, and we have at least 25 assistants, probably a little more now, that are working just with lawyers. So we don't yet train the assistants to work with lawyers, so our lawyers are training each assistant in terms of how each lawyer works. But some of our assistants actually are lawyers as well. They're lawyers locally in their countries. So those tend to be, of course, more experienced. So those people are usually going to know more about law. But I'll get back to that question towards the end. But great question. Now, talking about the rest of this thing, as you can see on the slide, the next part would be Western Europe in terms of somebody more expensive, which would be 20 to 30 euros an hour, and then somebody. Well, I think I skipped. No, I did talk about the U.S. And then a more experienced virtual assistant in the U.S. will cost definitely above 30 bucks an hour. And the reason I know this is because I'm a part of a lot of different virtual assistant groups on Facebook, where people actually tell you, how much should you charge? There's actually a group called Virtual Assistant Savvies that are mostly US-based assistants. And I think the cheapest anybody charges that when they're just starting out starts at about 25 bucks an hour. But of course, within that group, people encourage other assistants to charge more based on, their skills. But that kind of gives you an idea, right? So, of course, when you're talking about working with somebody in Latin America or the Philippines, the cost is much lower, which is kind of why you're probably here in terms of learning more about it. Now, let me switch now about comparing maybe some of the obvious things between hiring a virtual assistant compared to an in-house American employee. And I mean, the difference between somebody outside the US or somebody in the US, at least before COVID, most people were working with people inside their office. So of course, when you have somebody in-house working at your office, you gotta, pay for all those extra office costs or recruitment costs, which are very typical of hiring somebody in-house for an American company. Now, of course, part of the reason our company has grown is because I guess obviously with what's happening with COVID, a lot of people realize that a lot of people can work remotely, even if they're local. So then they're like, well, I had to fire a bunch of people, but now they're like, I can see that the ones that I kept that are working virtually, I could probably hire more people that are going to be just virtual. Why not hire them outside the US, right? And that's one of those benefits. Now, by the way, Alejandra, please interrupt me whenever you're going to be chatting about the recruitment, okay?
Sure.
Now, we're going to be spending a few more minutes on this, which is part of the main topic of the presentation, comparing virtual Latinos. In this case, we're talking about our agency model. So I'll briefly explain what that is. That is when we do all the work for our clients, which means our client spends about 2 hours working with us. The first hour is usually chatting with me to really get to know you. The second hour is usually interviewing the top 2 candidates after we send you 3 or 4. So we're going to compare that to somebody that's going to be a US-based in-house staff compared to somebody in the US that's working virtually compared to somebody in the Philippines, right? So the first item here is the time to hire. So we take, in most cases, 7 business days, which is really just about a week and a half. We generally tell our clients that within 2 weeks from the moment that you have our client interview to the moment the assistant starts to work with you, usually takes about 2 weeks, which is pretty fast. Now, if you're going to be getting somebody in house, I mean, the process can vary a lot, but usually hiring is not easy. It requires a lot of time to post jobs, find people, schedule interviews, especially in person, and eventually hire them. So that process obviously can vary, but usually, probably at the very least, it's going to be a month, and it could be a lot more months. If you're going to hire somebody virtually, it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks in the U.S. And in the Philippines, it can totally vary too. In this case, you know, it can go from like a few days to, of course, a few months, depending on how complex of a type of position that you're, looking for. In terms of the recruitment costs, so one of the things that I definitely see that I didn't expect is that people compare us to a typical recruitment agency at some point, uh, even though we're not exactly a recruitment agency. So it's very typical that a recruitment agency is going to actually charge you something up front, as well as probably some part of the staff's salary. In our case, we don't charge any recruitment fees, so there's no upfront costs. Our company makes money from a commission from the hourly rates. So obviously that is zero. If you're going to be hiring somebody in-house in the US, the cost can vary depending on how you do it. Probably at the very least, you're going to spend at least $50 up front to post a job somewhere, right? But it could be more depending on how much your HR or your time is worth in terms of investing the time to do it yourself or a recruitment agency. And then you can see the rest. Usually for hiring in the US, virtually it's zero. Virtual assistants in the Philippines, probably zero if you're going through an agency, or if you're going through onlinejobs.ph, it's currently about $80 for 1 month, which is what you have to pay at least to use their system. Now, in terms of pre-vetted talent, and that's kind of something that we definitely focus on a lot. For me, because of my struggles and my challenges, I wanted to be able to offer a service that would only find the best people, right? Which is why companies like TopTal, which is a company that focuses on hiring mostly software-based jobs, is doing great in the US. They hire mostly US-based programmers. They say that they get the top 3%. And we're kind of doing something very similar, but in Latin America, and we do not do anything with programmers, at least not yet. So we do have pre-vetted talent, and you can hear the rest in the U.S. Somebody in house probably not necessarily pre-vetted except by you. If you're getting somebody that's a virtual, US-based assistant, it could definitely vary, but usually also not. And if you're hiring through a Filipino, like I said, also directory, they're also not really vetted. Now, there's a lot of reviews, which is different, but they're not necessarily pre-vetted. Again, it depends what you're using. Now, on our system, in terms of the price, so the lowest price when you hire somebody from us, entry level full time, is $8 an hour. Like I mentioned, in terms of an in-house staff, at least if it's qualified to do what you like them to do, it'll probably be about $25 an hour. Of course, you can always pay minimum wage if you're willing to train them. Otherwise, the price will vary based on what you're trying to do. For the virtual assistant that's in the US, like I mentioned, it's probably going to be at least 25 as well, but it depends. And somebody in the Philippines, probably at the very least $3 an hour. In terms of the quality guarantee, so we do guarantee the quality that if the person that we're finding for you is not good enough, and you're not happy with them, we basically replace them with somebody else, and we do all the work. You don't have to do anything. We'll simply provide you with more candidates so you can review and choose who you want to hire. I think that's happened to us twice so far out of 100 and almost 80 different people hired. So it's very low because we try to do the best job from the very beginning, but we do offer that guarantee in case that happens. There's usually no guarantee for somebody that you hire in-house. Again, depending on what you use. In terms of a US-based virtual assistant, the quality guarantee may vary depending on where you hire them from. And from the Philippines, also probably not. Again, depending on where you hire from. In terms of flexible schedules, definitely most virtual assistants are pretty flexible. So that's a yes for Virtual Latinos. An in-house staff is usually not as flexible. If they're going to be working irregular hours, they're going to come to the office. That's usually less flexible. A US-based virtual assistant, of course, again, it'll be probably flexible, and somebody in the Philippines also. Now, in terms of the next number, number 7, certified professional. So when I started this company, because we have the background in marketing, so we started providing free courses in marketing that we paid for to our virtual assistants. So we would train them with US-based marketing training from Digital Marketer. So they were taking those courses and they would get, of course, a certification at the end. Now, we're not focusing on the marketing anymore, but we are creating actually our own training with different industries that we're going to be creating our own certifications so that our assistants are going to be actually trained before they get hired. Right now, we don't train practically anyone because we're still working on building that platform, but the platform itself is ready. It's going to be at academy.virtuallatinos.com. That's where we're going to create the actual courses that we're going to provide for free to our assistants. And we definitely think that that's going to be a big differentiator compared to a lot of companies who don't train their assistants at all, like we currently do, right? But when I started this, I thought to myself, I don't want to just hire people. I want to really actually be a great resource and help the community, learn how to work virtually, give them access to courses and resources so that they can actually improve their skills. So that's definitely something that we're totally up for. Of course, an in-house US-based assistant or staff, they might already be certified in the US for different things depending on what their backgrounds are, as well as a virtual assistant in the US. For the Filipino virtual assistants, I mean, in most cases, there's also no training provided to them. Again, depending on how you find them or who you hire, they might have some type of certifications, and some of them do. In the Philippines, there's a lot more people that are definitely aware of a lot of software that we use in the U.S., such as HubSpot, Mailchimp, and a bunch of other systems. The Filipinos tend to have a better grasp in terms of knowing the software or having certifications from those systems, which our Latinos usually don't, which is why we're still kind of training them. Then the next one is about turnover, and that's a big scary thing. Everyone hates to waste their time and money recruiting people and then them leaving, right? So we also focus a lot on that. We really wanted to have people who would not just quit on us. So we have a very, very low turnover rate. It's been less than 5 people who've decided to not work anymore with our clients. I can tell you that only in 2 cases it was because they were offered a much better pay rate, which is also very uncommon. But 1 out of the 2 actually came back to work with our clients. So far I could say that our turnover in terms of the assistant choosing to leave has been 1 out of everybody so far. Somebody in the U.S., maybe you have a low turnover depending on who you hire and your recruitment process. A U.S.-based virtual assistant, that will vary. And somebody from the Philippines, again, it'll probably be medium to high. It's been my experience, as well as those comments from our clients, that they had problems with people in the Philippines just ditching them. Now, Sean is asking, do you have a minimum hour requirement or just full time? Great question. Our minimum is actually just 10 hours a week. So it's a pretty low minimum. It's a total of 40 hours in 1 month. And that's actually the minimum to hire anybody through our agency. Just during 1 month, you got to pay for at least 40 hours, which is about 10 hours a week. So we try to do that on purpose to really, have more reasons for people to say yes, which tends to be the case. So great question, Sean. Thank you for that. In terms of the time zone, we kind of already spoke about the time zone. So in most cases, of course, Latinos or Americans, yes. And for the Filipinos, the answer is no. And the success rate, at least from our perspective, we have a very high success rate. Our assistants are super happy. We have a really great internal community that we manage through Telegram, which is a instant messaging app like WhatsApp or like, I guess, Facebook Messenger. And it's great. People are very happy. In fact, once a month, we put out a message on our general community of everybody who's been pre-vetted and accepted into our community. We make a list of everybody who was hired so that people actually see that, this is obviously real. People are getting jobs and getting paid. Of course, success rate in the US is usually high if you chose the right person. If in terms of the virtual assistant in the US, again, it depends on, who you hire. And in the Philippines, again, everything, of course, depends, but at least from our experience and some of the experiences from our clients, the success rate in the Philippines, in some cases, has not been great. In some cases, it's amazing, and they're going to keep their assistants in the Philippines, and then they hire some Latinos on top of the Filipinos. In some cases, they're kind of coming to us saying, well, we've been working with the Filipinos, they're okay, but some of them we don't love, so we're considering other options, right? So That'll vary. All right. I'm going to just kind of go through this a bit fast because I did want to focus on the main topic, but I'm going to just go through this in terms of, which tasks could you assign to someone? And in this case, of course, we're talking about specifically virtual assistants. The reality is that it can be practically anything that people can do through the computer. In this specific slide, we're just putting the main types of categories, which are marketing tasks, administrative tasks, in this case, budgeting tasks, which could also be sales related. So admin, marketing, or sales tend to be the most common types of tasks. But I can tell you that we have people who are medical doctors, engineers, architects, lawyers. We have people from lots of different backgrounds also working with companies that are very varied, that come from lots of different types of industries. So our assistants can definitely help with a lot of different things. But this is just kind of a general idea. Now, one of the things we did and decided to do to make it easier for our clients to choose what type of things you want to give your assistant to do is we actually created this thing that we called menus, which are the most common 18 to 20 tasks from different industries. Of course, on this webinar, it will be just a video, so you won't be able to click on it. But I'm going to open up just, actually, I can't even open up this slide either. But we will be happy to also share with you the PDF of these slides. You will be able to click on this and you'll be able to actually see what I'm about to show you, which is basically the list of tasks. And Alejandra, if you can actually send me the link, I'll just open it up.
I already uploaded it there, so if you
it's in
click
one of the
on the
slides?
slides, no,
you're right, you're right. It's over here. You're right. So right over
if you
here.
just open, you will see there. Yeah,
There
there
we
you
go.
go.
Okay. So obviously you can't read it right now. It's a little too tiny, but at least you'll be able to get the idea that it's just a 4-page document with the most common tasks. In this case, this is like our general menu for most businesses. So it's not focused on any one specific industry, but we have others for lawyers, property management, real estate, healthcare, and we're building more as we're doing this. So let me go back to the slides. Okay, this is not the best to have to go through this like this, but all right. Now, let me just talk about, a little bit about how we're working in terms of the agency. Like I mentioned previously, our assistants start as low as $8 an hour for a full-time assistant. We don't charge anything up front, so it's really kind of easy. All you got to pay is the minimum for like 40 hours, like I mentioned. Our pricing does start $2 more expensive if you're starting part-time. So instead of 8, it would start at $10 an hour if you only wanted 10 hours a week. But the $8 an hour, it's for 31 hours or more per week. That's what we consider full-time. And then we still have the other option called the directory, where the actual assistants would start at about $5 an hour, and we charge a membership that's actually $5 a day. As a minimum, but you got to prepay that 3 months in advance. We won't be talking into detail about that, but you can definitely check our website for that in terms of more details. And Thomas, yes, we can definitely send you the sheet for lawyers. No problem. Alejandra, if you can make a note of that, we'll make sure to send Thomas that so he can take a look at that.
Definitely.
Now, the benefits of Virtual Latinos. So when you're hiring through the agency, there's no ongoing fees or startup fees. You only pay for the hours, and that's it. We take care of everything else, the recruitment, the legal process in terms of hiring them, paying them, so that you can focus on just working with them. So really, our goal is to connect our clients with the best talent from Latin America. We absolutely do all the hiring and vetting. We actually have a really long process, like I mentioned, which I won't get into this. I'll probably go into a different webinar to talk about that. But generally speaking, we have 2 main stages. The first stage is the one that takes 4 to 6 weeks for the assistants to be accepted into our community, where we accept about 7.5% of everybody who applies. Then the second part comes when the clients come to us, they speak to us in terms of their specific needs, and we do the custom personalized recruitment for each of them. That takes those 7 business days I spoke about, and then we end up hiring less than 2% of them. Let me see. And yes, Kim, Alejandra can also send you the one for real estate, which is also very useful. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about our recruitment process. So this is going to be what Alejandra is going to talk about. And Ale, We don't have too much time just because we do want to
Yeah.
have the ability for them to ask questions, but you can walk them through it.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about our program recruitment process that we know that works, and you will be wondering why are we so sure. In this case, as Jaime said, we already have an application process that is really long for the assistants. I was one of the assistants that did that before, and I can tell you that it's great because you need to be really committed, and you need to be like really looking for a job and for a long-term job to do this. Why? If you can see on the image, we do have our marketing strategy to attract top performers from Latin America. Then everyone will fill up a short form, and we will review that really quick in terms that we just need them to go through a complete application. The complete application, it's really long, and it's where we test the English proficiency, and also we ask them to to some assessments, and it's really complete, to tell you that way, and it's really long. So what happens here, a lot of assistants that are not really committed, or they don't have the time, or they already have a job or something related, they won't do it. And we have a lot of cases. That's why we can see this 75% going lower to the 22%. And after this, we will review and accept. Of course, if they have everything that Virtual Latino wants, we will ask them to join and to do a final profile assessment. This is another thing that we evaluate really through, because we want them to be really detail oriented, and we ask them to do specific stuff in order to see if they read, if they know, trying to trying to test everything. And when that happened to me, after that, you receive an email saying like, you have been accepted, now you're ready to apply for jobs. But the thing doesn't stop there. So that's why this is great, because you feel part of the community, but after that you still need to go through a lot of interviews, right? So this is where our recruitment team is great, because they're always vetting and interviewing people. And that's why Rob's question was great. How do we know that that person is the right one for you? It's because our recruitment team, it's like really detail oriented also, and we search and vet and interview each person just to just for you, just what you actually asked for. So after all this, the assistant still needs to send their proposals and various interviews until you as a client interview them. And that's how we get the top virtual assistants. So as you can see, this is very long, and we have been, well, I think since I'm from Virtual Latinos, I've seen this process to go to go better and better, because we are always trying to get the best for our clients. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's an overall view.
Great. Thank you, Alejandra. Yeah. And I mean, we're going to talk about a little more points about how that works. But yeah, I can tell you that definitely the process is definitely, the key to our success in terms of getting the right, good candidates. So, yes, here I'm going to share with you just this is a screenshot of what the PDFs that we call profiles that we send to our clients who hire through the agency get. So after the 7 days, we send you 3 or 4 PDFs like this. They're usually between 3 to 4 pages long, sometimes longer, depending on how many tasks you need help with. On the left side, you're going to see the first page, which is kind of a summary of the assistant with their name, their country, number of years of experience, education, skills. We give you their English test results. We also give you a link to actually see their personality test, the actual results. So that's an icon that you can click, and you can actually see their exact scores. And also underneath their picture, there's an icon that says "Listen to me." If you click on it, it'll open up in Google Drive so you can actually hear them speak in English, so you can get an idea of how their accent is when they're speaking in English. And so we give you, of course, their introduction, their summary, a little bit of their work experience. On the first page, there's also the highlights of the interview. And again, the interviews are specifically to each client. So compared to what other companies do, we don't just have a bunch of PDFs ready to send you, because sometimes people call us and they're like, oh yeah, I need somebody by tomorrow. I'm like, sorry, we don't work like that. We take long on purpose because we customize each of these PDFs for the client. So what you see on the right side, those are the notes that we take during the interviews and we share them with you. So those notes are specific to the types of tasks that you request. Now, this is only one page out of like 3 or 4 of notes. So you can see the only item you see there is general admin tasks. So those are notes about what Andrea could specifically do for general admin tasks, right? But you can say, hey, I need help with answering the phone, or I need help with sending emails, or whatever. Those would be the different tasks that would be listed on your PDF specifically for you, with the notes related to what that assistant can do or has previous experience in terms of doing those tasks. Um, so yeah, that's kind of that. Now, I'm going to just quickly go through this so we can go to the question section. So types of virtual assistants, as you can imagine, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of different types of assistants. These are like the most common people that are going to do like customer support or tech support, people who are going to help with sales, setting appointments, follow-ups, cold calling, lead generation. Of course, usually the most typical is just a general virtual assistant that can do a little bit of everything. A real estate or property management VA, a VA for a specific professional, in this case for doctors, lawyers, accountants, you name it. We have different clients that are in the services professions, or a general virtual marketer. That's usually like a basic entry level person who can help with a lot of marketing tasks. And then we have like the specialized virtual marketer, somebody that usually does only one specific thing within marketing. And those are, of course, usually the last one are a bit more expensive. We're not going to go right now through the stories and testimonials from some of our clients. I'm just going to quickly tell you, this is a company from San Diego. He currently hires 11 assistants. His name is Julio, and he's been very happy with our company. This is another company who's a nonprofit who helps people who don't have parents, foster children in Tijuana, Mexico. Another client, in this case, an immigration law firm, currently hiring 2 assistants, and a health and wellness company hiring 1 assistant. So there's definitely more reviews on our site, but we, wanted to share those with you if we had time to go through them. We also have a great both client and a partner who's also actively promoting our company as well as other companies she works with. This is Marcy Rader. She actually helps entrepreneurs learn how to manage their businesses and how to actually, one of those components is actually working with virtual assistants. So she hired 1 person, or at least 1 person from 4 or 5 different companies. And so she talks about all of them, including us. So she's very happy working with us. But the takeaways are, we help you find great skilled assistants. In this case, even the word assistant, just so you know, it's wrong. We really think that we have great virtual staff because they're not really just assistants anymore. That was just the terminology that was kept. And so, we're hoping that we're going to be the best solution for you so that you can easily find the best. We help you hire them. They're going to be in your time zone. They're going to be affordable. And our team does most of the hard work for you so you don't have to. And yeah, that's kind of it. We definitely have some time for questions. So if you guys want to type in anything, I'd be happy to answer. Let me read over here. Okay, so far, no questions yet. So let me go back to Rob's.
Jaime, there is a question from Alma Rosa. I don't know if you can see the open questions below.
Let me see. Yeah, I see Alma said that she also wants the sheet from the attorneys, the menu, right?
Yes. No,
okay,
it's another question. I don't know if you
I
can
know.
see.
I can't see it. Oh, what?
Where
Just tell me what the question is. Oh, I see it at the bottom.
Yeah,
Oh, there we
exactly.
go. Sorry. How can you ensure that my firm's confidential information systems, et cetera, are protected and not shared by the VA with other law firms doing the same? Are VAs limited to 1 law firm in the same area for a hiring period? Okay, great question. Nobody's actually asked me that specific question before. So to answer the question, first I'll tell you that there is not a 100% bulletproof method for keeping confidential information. because unfortunately we're dealing with humans and humans tend to be able to do errors. So now I'll tell you what we do about it in terms of trying to avoid people obviously doing and sharing confidential information. So the first thing that we encourage our clients to do is to send a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, to be sent from your company directly to them. They can sign it. We are not part of that process because you work with the assistant directly, so they can sign it for you, but we as a company don't sign a non-disclosure agreement because we work with lots of different clients. Uh, but I'll tell you that in general, our advice is you need to build trust in the relationship between you and the assistant, and trust only comes with time. So now, an example would be, don't give your assistant your bank account information from the first day, right? You probably need to give him or her access to some information at the beginning until you start to build a relationship with them, work with them, and then of course be able to, get to trust them. How can we uphold an agreement if not in the U.S.? Great question. So the agreement that you sign, if you hire through our company, it is a U.S. company, so we are in the U.S. and you are in the U.S. So the relationship, the actual legal relationship, is between you and us. And yes, our we separately have agreements with our assistants that include, a small paragraph about, they need to keep all of our clients' confidential information confidential. But the reality is that yes, there's nothing we can really do to prevent someone who wants to do something bad if they wanted to steal information from you. And those were questions that our clients were definitely asking us. Specifically, the lawyers were the first ones who asked us. But I'll tell you, most of our clients work with web-based systems, which means, most of that data that those clients, whether they're doctors or lawyers who have very sensitive information they're usually on these web-based systems, which means that data doesn't actually live on the assistant's computer. They simply access it over the web. Right now, of course, if you give them some type of admin access to the assistant so that they can export the data and save it locally in their computer, yeah, that's definitely possible. But again, I'll tell you what I tell everybody. The reality is that we focus on finding people who are all about forming long-term relationships with our clients and our company, which is why we vet everyone. I can tell you that someone who would be out to get and steal information is not going to go through my time-consuming process just to steal some random client information to see what they're going to do with it. The people that are coming to us and are looking to find a job, again, they went through all this process that took them a long time. We know they're serious about finding a job, right? But again, there's no way that I could ever guarantee that someone's not going to do something bad. Just like somebody in the U.S., you could hire somebody in the U.S. and they could do something bad and steal information. So can somebody in Latin America. Yes, the big difference is you cannot sue necessarily somebody that's outside the U.S. in terms of doing anything about it. And so, yeah, that is definitely a reality. How many California immigration law firms are currently working with you? I don't believe we have any California immigration law firms right now. We have immigration law firms from the East Coast, Texas, and a lot of other states, but not in California yet. Not that we know of. I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure I know all of our clients so far. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely reaching out to people in California. Those are the marketing campaigns we're running, but not that I know of so far. So great question. Thank you, Alma, for all those great questions. And I think I didn't answer it fully. No, there's no way that we're going to say that there's going to be like geographic locations in terms of like, no, if you work with an assistant in Los Angeles, that person cannot work with somebody else. Yes, they could. If you don't hire them full time, they're definitely going to have time to work with another client. Now, most people who are working full time only work with one client, but it's definitely you're going to start with somebody part time. That person can certainly work with someone else. So I hope that answered the question. I hope I did. What if I am not in America? Would Virtual Latinos still be a good fit? Kayla, I'm not sure where you're at, but yeah, as long as you are somewhere like in Canada or any other country where you care that the assistant happens to be actually, in this time zone, and by this time zone I mean the American time zone, whether it's north or south, then they could definitely be helpful. I'll tell you that we have clients in Europe. So we have people in the UK and in France who are working with our assistants. So I believe it works for them as well. We don't yet have anybody from Australia, but we do have people in Canada, of course, because it's also the same time zone. All right. Thank you, Cindy, for the comment that it's been very informational. I appreciate it. So any other questions that I could answer? All right, not yet. Some people ask, like how does the billing work? If you're interested in that, I'll tell you that we try to keep it uh, as automated as possible. We actually now require everybody to automate their payments with our company after 6 weeks of working with our assistant. So the first 6 weeks we can do it manually. If you choose to do so, after that we try to do it automatic so that you don't have to waste time with billing and payments. And in terms of how often we do this, for most people we do it every week. So it's usually a post payment at the end of the week after the assistant worked. But some people choose to pay every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. In that case, it will actually be a prepayment in advance. Um, how long does it take for the whole process? How much time? So Rob is asking a question, how much time will it take till I start working with a VA? So in most cases, from the moment that we finish the client interview, which is the second step in terms of getting to know you as a client, it'll take 7 business days. So that's about a week and a half in terms of completing the process to send you 3 to 4 candidates. Then you can usually start interviewing them the next day. If you answer who you want to, interview from the 3 to 4 candidates, you pick the top 2. We can usually schedule interviews the next day, and usually the day after that you can start working with them. Hi Thomas, I'm just reading here. I'm glad that you like the presentation. Thank you. Yes, you can always start at 10 hours a week and then scale up, no problem. If you hire part-time, can you set the hours of availability or not really? Yes. Yes, you can set the hours of the availability, but to probably answer what I think you're thinking, it has to be, you only get to have the assistant for the hours that you pay for them to work, and it has to be a set schedule. So if you're going to start, let's say, at 10 hours a week, which is, let's say, the most typical is Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, 10 hours a week would be about 2 hours a day. So yes, we would ask you to tell me exactly from what hour to what hour, which means, let's say, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. The minimum block of hours that you need to put together is 2 hours. Now, let's say that you start at 20 hours. 20 hours is about 4 hours a day. You could split that up in 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. But what you cannot do is say, hey, I want to pay for 10 hours, but I want them to just be available from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and just work 2 hours. For that, that doesn't work. I'm not saying that you said that, but just in case anybody has that question. All right. So I hope that answered that. Do you have to commit to only 10 hours for the time I work with my assistant? Yeah, so you do have to commit for at least 10 hours a week, Vivian. So great question. And I'm glad that answer was helpful, Thomas. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Vivian, but yeah, the minimum is 10 hours a week in terms of what we mentioned, but not really. Legally, our agreement says the minimum is 40 hours a month. So some clients who want to start to test it, they want to do 20 hours a week. So they technically could just work for 2 weeks, 20 and 20 adds up to 40. If it doesn't work out after 2 weeks, that could be the minimum. But in terms of if you're going to work with somebody on an ongoing basis, yes, the minimum would be 10 hours a week. All right, great questions. Thank you. Vivian is asking, if I get more business and need more help, can I ask to work more hours from them? Great question. Sorry, I didn't answer that yet. Yes, the answer is yes. We have a little online form that all of our clients have the access in order to actually request more hours. So yeah, you usually just either you or the assistant can fill out that form requesting either additional hours just one time for that 1 week, or you could also pre-approve, let's say, an extra 5 hours a week, where we would charge you, let's say, the 10 hours a week as the base every week. But then if the assistant, if you want the assistant to work additional hours, if there is a need, you can always pre-approve 2 extra hours a week or 5 extra hours a week, and we would just charge you the extra hours separately. So great question. Analma is asking, do any of your VAs know how much do how to do U.S. payroll twice a month? The answer is probably not. We do have assistants who have experience with bookkeeping, with payroll, but usually locally in terms of how it works in their country. Now, we do have a lot of clients, most of our clients use QuickBooks Online. We use QuickBooks Online and we do payroll through that. So it's usually pretty easy if you're using QuickBooks Payroll, but depending on how you do payroll, it could be more complicated. But if you're willing to teach them, they could probably do it. So I hope that answers that question. Um, sure, no problem. All right, so I'm going to take another 2 minutes of questions, and then we'll end this in case anybody wants to go. But I really love the questions. Thank you so much for asking these and for your interest and for your time. You're definitely going to get an email with a copy of the slides and a link to the webinar once it's been recorded and uploaded online. So you can definitely go through that presentation later as well. And for those who ask for the menus, we'll also send them to you so you can take a look at it. We'd be happy to share it with them. Itzel, another question. If I choose to start working 10 hours a week and I don't have enough work to give to my assistant, what happens? Oh, great question. So yes, we actually have always the same amount of hours that we're going to charge our clients as well as the same amount of hours that we're going to pay our assistants. So let's say that the assistant 1 week only worked, let's say 7 hours, and you were hiring for 10, which is our minimum. What the assistants need to do is actually send an email and tell you as the client, hi, client X, as you know, I get paid always the same amount of hours, which is in this case 10 a week, but this week I only worked 7 hours. So the answer is they need to make up those 3 hours. So the email that we provide to them as a template basically lets them write to you saying, hey, this week I only worked 7 out of the 10 hours, so I owe you 3. So then the actual assistant is responsible for making up those hours, so that you never get to pay for hours that they didn't work. All right, so great question. Now we do have our assistants doing time tracking, so we track their hours. I mean, they track their hours and then they report them to us, and we check them to make sure that they're actually doing the hours that they're supposed to be working. So great question. Thank you for that as well. All right. So I think there might not be any more questions. I thank you everyone so much for coming. It's really, really great to have you guys here. I really appreciate your help. I'm going to put my video just to say goodbye. And so thank you so much for everyone's time. Great questions. I hope this topic was useful. If you want to come up with any more ideas of what we should cover, we'd be happy to. Always looking for new ideas. So thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas, for the nice comments. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sean and Rob. Also, thank you everyone for being here. And I will be sending you the emails. And for the people that ask for the menus, I will be sending that too.
Yes. All right. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
and we will be in touch. Bye bye.
Bye.